Hello and welcome to a quick revision session on the extract analysis section of your GCSE English language exam. The question focuses on how does Harper Lee use language to influence the reader's view of the incident of the gifts in the knot hole. Now this question came up last year, 2012 in June, so it's really pertinent, and if you want the actual extract that the questions are based on, then check out the VLE. Now this is based on a recent assessment we did with Year 9, so this is feedback based on their work, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide 5 things that they did really well and 5 things that they could improve on, and I think it will really help you, our own current Year 11, to see the weaknesses of students' writing and how to address them. Firstly, let's look at what went well. Really good P-chain structure, well organised, point, plenty of evidence, good explanation, and that worked really well and helped you to hit the marks that you needed. Now a really important point for everyone, and was used well in this case, was discursive markers. Firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally. The examiner has certain marks to give per paragraph, per point. Make it obvious that you've made enough points. Use them all the time. All points really well supported. Make sure you're picking the right quotes, not just any quote. Pick a quote that really supports your point and has got a good piece of language in there that can really show off your language analysis skills and links into the question. Now, analytical adverbs, you might not know much about them if you're not in my class, but they're really important. I'm going to showcase some of them later on, show you what they're about, and also I'm going to do a separate video just on those alone. They're really simple to use and they really stand out in your work. Another important point is focusing on the reader. How does the author get their ideas across through use of language? And another thing that we've been really working on that's really important, don't keep using the word show. Don't keep saying the author uses adjectives to show. Use other words such as express or highlight or exemplify. Again, I'll be doing another video on that skill specifically. Really important. Now, even better if, or what can we do to improve? I'm going to fly through these very quickly because I'm going to do a little bit more on each one in a slide with a lot of examples and some examples of students' work, which you can see and pause the video and have a good read of. But I'm just going to fly through all 5 quickly now. The first one is mixing up language terms. People saying the authors use an adverb when it's an adjective. Really can't afford to do that. Second big target, linking back to the key words of the question at the start and particularly at the end of each paragraph, clarifying your point and making sure you're linking in to show your understanding. I'll do more on that later. Now I have a sample paragraph to show you on this. It's really important. Not just starting off your paragraph each time with saying he uses a metaphor or she uses a simile. Start with an actual point that's relevant to the question. I'll show you an example of this later, how not to do it and how to do it. Again, really important, and that's where people lose marks. They're not answering the actual question. Number 4, it's an old one and an obvious one, and that's people who are quoting far too long. 4 lines long, taking up too much space, and really the examiners want to see good evidence, but they don't want to be rereading stuff straight from the extract. Again, I'll go into this in greater detail in a moment. And number 5, clearly explaining the impact of the words on the reader. The question always has the word influence. So how does it make us see? How does it make us feel? All those things. I'll go into more detail on that one as well. Right, back to target number 1 to just look at it in a little bit more detail, and that's mixing up language terms. It's so important that you don't do this. If you're not sure, don't do it. You can see in this case here, and if you can pause it, you can have a look at it in greater detail, but the student has identified something as an adverb when it's an adjective. It's an honest mistake. It's a mistake that happens a lot. But be careful, because that's what really kind of lets the examiner see maybe your weaknesses and can really stand out. So only use things that you're 100% sure are correct: nouns, verbs, dialect, dialogue, whatever it is. And if you're not sure, don't use it. Right, and target number 2 in a little bit more detail. Now, this is where a lot of people go wrong, and they're not linking back to the key words. You can see here in the paragraph that's just coming up. Again, you can pause it to look at it in more detail. The student has written the verb slipped makes it sound like Scout and Jem have forgotten everything because it was so tempting. And again, that's a really good point. They're focusing on the language. They've used an embedded quote, but what they haven't done is just linked it back to the key words of the question. And you can see under there I've already written out a sample one where you can use that exact point. But instead of finishing on so tempting, you can say, which influences the reader to think that this incident is a very blank incident. You fill in your point, but it just links it back. And if you can do that each time, you will force yourself to make sure your point is relevant and does connect with the question. And if it doesn't, you need to go back and start that paragraph again. But it will really stop you from summarising and losing sight of the question, and that's how you will avoid losing big marks. And following on from that is using the same key words from the question in your opening line of each paragraph. So firstly, the author uses language to influence the reader to see that blank. Now don't say firstly the author uses language to influence the reader by using metaphors. Don't start by focusing on a language feature. Focus on a point. That the incident at the knothole was mysterious, that it was scary, that it was magical. They're the points. The question is, how does it influence us to our view of the incident? Influencing our view of that, the answer isn't metaphor or simile. The answer is our opinion, our view of it. So you need to make sure you focus on the point and then later refer to the language device, maybe after the quote or when you're setting out your quote, then refer to metaphor, refer to adjectives, dialect, whatever it is. But don't start off each paragraph by referring to language. Answer the question first and then show and explain how you got there. Now here's a perfect example of this. Student starts off with a discursive marker, nice and structured. Secondly, Harper Lee creatively uses metaphorical verbs in the extract to influence our view of the gifts in the knothole. Keywords from the question, use of analytical adverb, but it hasn't actually provided a point. What is our view? What is our response to this? And that's not mentioned. All there is a reference to the language device. Go first with your point, then the language after. And that's a perfect example of how not to do it. Now in contrast with that, what we have here is a perfect example of how to do it. And in this case, the student says the author uses language to influence our view of the incident of the gifts in the knothole as a mysterious thing and something that keeps making Scout and Jem go back again and again. All the key words of the question, but it's got a point, that it's mysterious and it draws them to it. That's the point. Later on, the student then goes on to say it's the use of colour or metaphor that kind of shows how it's mysterious. But the most important thing is to answer the question and to make your point clear, and everything else then flows from that quite naturally. Right, number 4, quotes being too long. This is the sign of a D grade, E grade student who really can't quite think of what to say, so they just fill the page with quotes from the extract. Don't do it. It stinks of laziness. Now I've seen some people use quotes as long as 4 lines, almost in a paragraph on itself. It's a complete waste of time and you need to learn how to pick out the important parts. I'm going to show you some examples of that now. What you can see here, really a maximum of 2 lines is more than enough. And if you need to start and end a long passage, then use an ellipsis in the middle to break out the part that you didn't want, either from the start to the end, or to take out the middle bit. And if you just pause the video and look at the examples there in green, you can see how that happens. The part in blue at the bottom that I really like is how to kind of take parts of the quote that you want and embed them into your general response. So for example, Jem and Scout found a packet of chewing gum, that's taken from the extract, and enjoyed it, just taking that word, and enjoyed it even though before that they considered that the Brew Radley's place was poison. So it's taking the quotes that you want, but not just setting it out there in 4 lines, because again, the examiner's reading hundreds of these scripts and generally it's the same quotes that are going to be picked, so they will probably tend to just kind of glance over them once they know that they're correct. And so it's really important that you just use the bits that you need and get on with showing your language skills and how you're able to understand what the author's really trying to say in the extract. Right, last but not least, is the most important fundamental thing about everything in this question. Every mark that's going, it's all about how does the author have an idea in his head and use words and language devices to get those ideas down and to make the reader see what he sees and feel what she feels and question ideas that they have questioned and to hear sounds that they heard that they're trying to put on paper. And you must try and explain the impact of the words on the reader. Now, if you've got a quote that's a sentence long, pick a particular word from that, and you'll see some examples in a little while that will really kind of express that. But here you can see I've given you some examples of how you can really kind of throw that out. And just decide in the moment, think about what does it actually do. Is the author trying to make the reader feel here, or question, or realize something, or see something, or imagine something, and put that in your explanation, PEE, in your last part of your paragraph. And just the examples you can see there in the blue, the subtle use of the adverb thoughtfully allows the reader to realize, say, that Lenny is thinking about what he's doing, or isn't just like a complete animal who acts on instinct. In the red, the use of imagery or metaphor helps paint a vivid image. Now, that's another part there. Instead of just using the word show all the time, again, if he's using an imagery or a metaphor, he's trying to paint pictures, or she is trying to paint pictures. So say that. Is trying to paint a vivid image so the reader can see just what the setting is like, or just what the incident of violence was really like. And the last example there, a perfect example really, is onomatopoeia. It's used an awful lot, and it was actually in this extract they used the word shrieked to describe Scout's reaction. So there you can say the use, or the clever use, or the thoughtful use of onomatopoeia clearly allows the reader to hear Scout's excitement, and to show that the gifts in the knothole is an incident where there is excitement or fear, and explore that. But again, to just summarize on that, think about what the author is trying to do to the reader, making them feel, making them question, making them hear, see, realize, all those things. Stay focused on that. And there you have your top 5. There they are to summarize. You can press pause to go over them again, and just to be sure, if not, play the video again. And we're going to have a quick look now at some really good examples. Again, you can pause them and read them in your own time, but I'll do a quick synopsis of each one, saying why I think it's so good. Now, this one's not only impressive because it's a Year 9 student, it's because they've got a single point, and that is the colour red. They really focus on it. They emphasise at least twice that it suggests danger. They embed the quote. They use the analytical adverb, clever in this case, and it just really does everything that it should do. It says Harper Lee discreetly uses colour to create an image in the reader's mind, and that the objects are dangerous. So it's got a point, it's focusing on language, focusing on technique, focusing on reader, and it just does it perfectly, and then it moves on. So again, that's the kind of thing that you need to be able to do, and it's got a discursive marker at the start to really show good organisation and structure of ideas. This is an interesting one because there's lots of good stuff going on here, but it misses out on opportunities. It identifies the word shriek, but doesn't identify it as onomatopoeia, and unfortunately then that would kind of really have a detrimental effect on the outcome in terms of a GCSE grade. It does, however, really focus on the reader. It talks about gripping their attention, talk about wanting to read on, to find out about the dangers in advance, and again, nice analytical adverb with the cleverly and using the key words of the question, but it misses out on that opportunity to identify the word shrieked as onomatopoeia. And last but not least, I really like this paragraph for the way that it doesn't just identify the words or the technique as a verb. It talks about it as an emotive verb. And again, that's something you should really look into. The idea of something not just being an adjective, but an aggressive adjective or an emotive adjective. Again, not just being a verb, but a metaphorical verb or an aggressive verb. And they really kind of pinpoint the words in this. So it's a really good paragraph and a really good one to kind of have a look at and get an idea of where you really need to go to get top marks.